Hi, my friend. So, today we are going to see the 8 money habits that are quietly draining your wallet. Okay? So, last month I ran an experiment on myself where I went through every single payment that left my bank account. Okay? Everything. Every subscription, every purchase, every direct debit, and I asked one question. Did I actually choose this or did I just end up here? Okay. So the answer generally unsettled me, all right? Because some of the things I was spending the most on weren't actually the things I thought carefully about, okay? There were things I'd never questioned. There were things that I never thought about because nobody around me was questioning them either. So, very quickly, before we continue, if you're finding this useful, please hit the like button, okay? It really helps this video with the YouTube algorithm and helps the channel grow. And if you want more content like this, make sure you subscribe and click on the notification bell, okay? So you don't miss any future videos. And as a thank you for doing that, here's a picture of... And that's the thing about the sneakiest money drains, okay? They don't feel like mistakes. They feel like they are completely normal, all right? They feel like that's just what people do, sort of thing, okay? So in this video, I'm going to walk you through 8 of them, not to make you feel guilty, all right? But just to hand you back the choice, all right? So that you can then decide if you want to do those expenses or not. Because the moment you see what something is actually costing you, you can decide if it's worth it or not. And that's real financial freedom, all right? So let's start with one that sounds like it's saving you money, but very often it isn't, okay? And that's buying cheap. So we've all done it. How did it work? We pick the cheaper version and the cheapest option in order to protect our budget, okay? And then 6 months later, we're buying the same thing again because the first one broke or it wore out or just never worked properly, all right? So, but here's the part that really gets under my skin. All right? Even when you know it isn't working and we often can't bring ourselves to replace it, so it ends up in a drawer, sitting there, silently judging us, okay? This is a psychological pattern, and it's called the sunk cost fallacy. So it's when we keep holding on to something, a purchase, a job, a habit, not because it's working, but because walking away feels like admitting a loss. It's just, even in investing, you do this. So here's the reframe I want you to take away. Keeping something you never use doesn't recover what you spent. It just costs you space and mental clutter on top, all right? So before your next budget purchase, pause for a second and ask yourself 2 things. 1, how often will I actually use this? If it's daily, cheap is probably the more expensive choice on the long term. So then 2, do I actually need this at all? A lot of cheap purchases never get used because they were solving a problem that didn't really exist. Then there's number 2. And this one takes more courage to talk about because buying a home feels like one of the most responsible things you can do. And it is absolutely. And I believe in buying and having your own house and purchasing a home. But it has to be done right, okay? So there's a version of this that quietly costs people hundreds of thousands of dollars over a lifetime, and most people don't see it coming. And what is it? All right, it's buying a bigger home than you need. All right, so here how it typically unfolds. You go to the bank to find out what you can borrow, right? And they come back with a number. And that number usually is bigger than you expected, okay? Maybe it's far enough for a better neighborhood, an extra bedroom, a bigger garden. The monthly repayments still look basically manageable, so you convince yourself it's fine. But let's have a look at what actually means in practice. So if you borrow $450,000, for example, at 4% over 30 years, and these percentages and can change and vary according to your country in which you're living, according to the historical moment. So, but let's just consider a 4% for this calculation, okay? And your total repayment, therefore, is over $773,000. So that's more than $323,000 in interest. So increase that loan from $450,000 to $550,000, the same rate, the same term, and now you're repaying over $944,000. So we're talking about nearly $400,000. And that is of just pure interest. All right? So the gap, that gap, which you can see, just from borrowing $100,000 more is roughly $170,000 more over the life of your loan. And that's before you factor in that a larger home also means higher energy bills, more maintenance, more to furnish, more taxes, etc., etc. So these costs don't arrive all at once, which is exactly why they're so easy to underestimate. So staying smaller for longer keeps your fixed costs down and gives your finances more breathing room. All right. So don't ask what can I borrow, but ask what do I actually need right now. All right. Then we have a third habit which is draining your wallet, and that is upgrading your phone every year. All right, so hands up if you've ever upgraded your phone before it was even close to breaking. Okay, here I am, that's me. I used to do this every single year. As soon as a new iPhone model dropped out, I'd find a reason why this one was worth it. It had a better camera, faster chips, and I also was one of the guys who would stay outside of the Apple store and in order to get the first iPhone. But at the end, I just stopped. I decided to stop. So I now tend to keep the phone for multiple years and upgrade only if really necessary, or if it really doesn't work as I would need, or things like that. What I actually do now, and what I started doing then, is that instead of buying a new iPhone, the same money I would spend for the new iPhone, I would actually buy Apple stock shares in the company, in Apple. And that has grown tremendously. I think I started in 2017 buying Apple stock shares, and they've it's been really worthwhile. In another video, I'm going to actually have to do that and calculate exactly how much you would have today if instead of buying the iPhones, you actually invested in the Apple stock. And it will be incredibly massive. So at the end, by changing the phone every year, there's a good chance you're paying for features that you'll never actually use. So the top tier models are also packed with technology that most people touch once and then forget about. So if your device still functions well, waiting another year before upgrading is one of the simplest, lowest effort ways to save money. And if your contract is up, okay, a SIM-only plan until your phone generally gives out is often the smartest move, all right? And if the latest model really does matter to you, that's completely valid. Just go in knowing the true cost, all right? The fourth habit then that is draining your wallet could be buying diamonds, all right? So buying diamonds. Let's talk about something that has one of the biggest markups of anything most people will ever buy, the engagement ring. So you've probably heard that it should cost 1 month's salary, or 2 or 3. It's said so often that most people assume it's a kind of timeless custom, okay? But it isn't, okay? That rule came from the De Beers advertising campaign. It started as 1 month's salary in the 1930s and was gradually nudged upwards by the industry. So, because bigger spend meant bigger margins. Knowing that doesn't make love any less real, okay? But it does change how you think about the number. Here's what's also worth knowing. Most engagement rings lose a significant portion of their retail value the moment you leave the shop, just as a car, okay? Not because of the quality, but because the retail markup is enormous, okay? So a lab-grown diamond is made from the same material as a mined one, okay? Trained gemologists can't even tell the difference without specialized equipment. But the price difference is 30 to 70% less than the same size and quality. If a diamond really matters to you, that's wonderful. No, this isn't about spending as little as possible. It's about spending intentional. So the whole video is about spending intentional, knowing what you're paying for something and what the alternatives are. So in this case, these are the alternatives. I'm just laying them out, okay? Then another habit is calling luxury purchases investments, right? So you want something expensive, okay? It can be a premium chair, designer bag, if you're a woman, that piece of tech, you strictly need, and you know it's stretchy, so your brain goes to work. But it's an investment. I'll use it for years. The quality will save me money in the long run. For women, the bags, I can resell the bag, this designer bag in 5 years and double my money. There are things like that. And the moment you land on those words, investment, or that word actually, so the moment you land on that word investment, something fascinating happens in your brain, okay? So you start noticing every piece of evidence that confirms the decision and quietly filtering out everything that doesn't, all right? That is called confirmation bias. And it's incredibly powerful, especially when money is involved. But here's the honest truth. A luxury item is almost certainly not an investment. It's unlikely to grow in value and generate income or improve your financial position, okay? And that's completely fine. Nice things are valid and are a valid reason to spend money. You don't need to justify them with a language that doesn't quite fit. Call it what it is. A treat, a reward, okay? Something you want, but then put it in the right budget category and make the decision with clear eyes. The waste isn't in buying the thing, it's in blurring the line between spending and investing, because the confusion then can follow you into decisions that actually matter. Habit number 6, extended warranties. And this is a big one. So you're at the checkout, everything's in your basket, and you're about to pay. And then they ask you, would you like to add an extended warranty for just X dollars a month? It feels responsible, it feels small, and you say yes without really thinking about it, okay? And here's the reality. Most products don't break during the extended warranty window. And the ones who do, the repair often costs less than the total you paid for the warranty itself. So on top of that, you're likely already covered in ways that you haven't thought about. So most products, for example, come with a manufacturer's warrant. Retailers often have returns and repair policies, and many credit cards automatically extend the warranty on purchases made with them, okay? So first of all, check yours. So extended warranties are pushed so hard because they're enormously profitable, okay? And that's the model. So most people never claim, and the company keeps the money. So a small alternative is to build your own repair fund, okay? Even setting aside a small amount each month means that if something does really break outside of a warranty, then you're covered and you've kept the money yourself the whole time. Okay, now we go into the 7th habit, and that is weddings, okay? And let me be completely upfront here, okay? I'm not against weddings. I had a wedding and I'll never regret it, okay? Having everyone you love in the same room, on the same day, celebrating the same thing, that is genuinely special and worth spending money on. But there's a specific pattern I've watched play out with friends and family and other people that I think is worth naming. And it usually starts with a venue list. Okay, someone shows you around the beautiful place, the price of the brochure feels manageable, maybe even lower than expected, so you lock the date. And then everything gets planned around that. And that's where the costs spiral. So the photographer, the florist, the DJ, the dress, the suit, but also the little additions to the venue changes for that you assumed were included, like the reception drinks, the reception drinks, a cake cutting fee, the room the night before. So none of this is surprising in isolation, but it adds up faster than almost any other purchase most people will make. The thing I hear most often afterwards isn't the regret about the day, obviously. It's the regret about the debt that came with it. So starting a marriage with financial stress baked in from day one is a rough beginning. So the thing I'd encourage is, before you see a single venue, write down what you can genuinely afford to spend, then decide together what actually matters, and give yourself full permission to skip everything else. A beautiful wedding doesn't have to mean a big one, okay? That's important to remember. Okay, and then finally, one you can fix even today. Very easy. The streaming subscriptions, okay? So the average person now spends over $400 a year on streaming services. So about 10% of people are actively paying for more than 5 at once. Wow, 5 subscriptions at once, okay? So now look, if you're genuinely watching content every single day across multiple platforms, I'm not here to tell you it's not worth it, okay? But I bet that most of us aren't doing that. And here's a quick mental test I find useful. Pick just one of your subscriptions and ask, how much would I need to watch this month to feel like it was worth the money? So say your answer is 2 full series. That's roughly 16 hours on the platform. Multiply that across 4 services and you'll need 64 hours of watching in a single month to justify them all. So that's basically a part-time job, okay? So cancel them. I canceled a few last year and I can't remember missing either of them, okay? So what most of us are really paying for is the feeling of having options. So not the options themselves, all right? The audit takes about 5 minutes. So go through the subscriptions, look at what you actually opened last month, and cancel anything that wasn't in use. All right? You can always come back when there's something worth watching. What stops you from doing that and subscribing again? It will only take you, no time at all. Okay? So none of this is about never spending your money. Remember this, all right? All these topics we've touched are not about spending money on things you enjoy, all right? So I've made all of these mistakes at some point, and I'll probably make a few more in the future. But what changed for me wasn't becoming more restrictive. It was getting honest about the difference between things I was consciously choosing and things that I was just defaulting into, okay? That's the important thing, and what I really want you to take home from this video. That shift from defaulting to deciding is where most of the real financial progress happens. So if any of these resonated though, I'd love to know which one it is in the comments. And if there's a money habit you think I've missed, please drop it below. I read everything and would love to know. Okay, thanks a lot. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Bye.